To start our discussion here about loops, for the first session anyway, we'll talk about loops here. We're going to start with 5.1, and that's on page 231. And we'll talk a little bit about the increment and the decrement operators. Now, some of you in your previous developments have stumbled across the idea of a counter. We want to be able to, and we'll call it an accumulator here in chapter 5, but at its core, it's just a counter. And with a counter, we want to say, okay, let's keep track of how many, we'll call it transactions, how many transactions it is that we are going to undertake. So we start our counter at 0, and when we add another transaction, we want our counter to increment. We want it to increase by 1. Now, with combined assignment, we could do this already back in chapter 3 and 4. What we could do is what you see in this first little code block up here on page 231, where we have number equals number plus 1. So remember, the way that math works is on the right-hand side of the operation first. So number plus 1 is evaluated first, and we get whatever that value is. And then C++ stores that value back to the variable itself. So that's a long way of saying number plus equals 1, which, remember, is the combined assignment way to do that. Now, we're saying that combined assignment for the increment and for the decrement can be a little bit long-winded too. So the increment operator, if we'll just scroll down a little bit here, is like you see right here in this field. It's still on page 231, is number plus plus. What that line does, and we'll see a little bit of the nuances of how this works a little bit later on when we do talk about accumulators. But essentially what that line does is it adds 1 to number, and it saves that value back into the variable's value. The decrement, the other side of that, num minus minus, what that does is it takes the value of num, subtracts 1 from it, and saves it back into the variable num's value. So what we're doing is we're taking something, and this is what C++ is really good at. And I'm mentioning C++ here by name because what is C++? It's really an incrementation of C. So that plus plus there means we're taking C and we're moving it 1 forward. So C++ is itself, in its name, a nod to the idea of the increment. So we will see this. We will use these increment and decrement counters, or the ability to use increment and decrement for our counters. We will see it here in chapter 5, and you will be, by the time we are done with C++ for 276, you will be well acquainted with that idea.